Mr. Greg Ellis, so excited to have you join me, man. I know you and I had a conversation, a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about doing this a couple of months down the road, but I had some open space and I'm like, let's get Greg on the podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, so before we hit record, we were talking about Maine, and it sounds like you might be contemplating getting up here to the Northeast.
Do you know
Where
what?
are you
No,
at with that?
well, where am I at? You see, a couple of months ago, I hadn't even really, I'd heard the word Maine, but I didn't know anything about it. And then I visited, I have some friends out there. I visited and took a couple of friends out there. And gosh, it's beautiful up there. It's almost like the hidden secret state, and it
Maybe
reminds
we
me, I
shouldn't
think,
talk about this.
let's not talk about Maine. In fact, let's re-record, start again. Take two. Welcome to oh, hang on, this is your show. Go on.
That's right. Just move to Hollywood, move to California, and your wildest dreams will come true. Stay away from Maine, stay away from Montana, stay away from the Northeast, and just leave us alone. That's kind of
Yeah,
how I
enter
am
the
right now.
entertainment industry. It's really easy. Offers of work will come your way. You'll be a movie star in months. Click on this link now. Call to
All
action.
you all you have to do is become a server at some bar or restaurant there, and the talent will find you, and then your dreams will be unlocked before you.
That's right. Just as long as your dreams include constant and consistent rejection, and an ever and ongoing search on the quest for value of oneself, which is not found through the job and the work and the celebration of the artist. It's found itself, capital S.
One thing, as I was thinking about and contemplating and researching what you've done is, I think that's the fairy tale, is that if you just move to Hollywood and you go be a server somewhere, or you connect with the right person just by happenstance, that things will work out. But I mean, you've been in this game for your entire life. I mean, since you were a child. And so I think that's a more realistic picture. And most people don't seem to understand that because we live in this immediate gratification society.
Yeah, and I think the entertainment business, you make a good point. The entertainment business has changed as well. It's kind of morphed away from the traditional mainstream media and studio environment. There used to be pilot season in TV. There's no pilot season anymore, effectively, with the advent of new media and streaming services, social media, or anti-social media, as I call it sometimes. And everyone wants to be that instant gratification. Everyone's presenting the best version they can invent of themselves on apps like IG and Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, this constant need for the dopamine hits it becomes an addiction. And I've talked about this before. That addiction is it's like the reverse psychology of device dependency that's embedded in the algorithm of these social media platforms. So the more I think we can put down the device, not exercise from the eyes down and exercise from the neck up, as well as physical exercise, get outside and get into nature. I think that's the real reliever, the natural world.
Yeah, that's a powerful perspective. I use social media. You use social media, and I use it very deliberately and intentionally. I won't pretend to say that it doesn't get the best of me from time to time. It certainly does, but ultimately, it's a tool, like a hammer would be a tool, and I try to use it as effectively as I possibly can to grow my business. But sometimes, it's nice to put the hammer down and just be around your family and be around the activities and interests and people that you like. And I think there's a lost art in today's society.
I think so too. I mean, you talk about putting the virtual hammer down. Maybe that's the virtual hammer. It's like you put the virtual hammer down and pick up a real hammer. See how you actually use that. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a skilled manual laborer, but there is an interest and a curiosity there of me to kind of within me to know more about, how things work, how you put things together, whether it be machines or whether it be houses or construction that's kind of interesting. And I think what I've seen recently is, I mentioned this at the start of the pandemic. What I was more afraid of was the panicdemic, as in the mental health, the social isolation, the bad messages of social distancing when it should be physical distancing, and social connectedness. We're human beings. We need to be with each other. And I think the more that we can actually experience that in person, experience, the better off we're going to be in a whole host of metrics, not least of which mental health.
So you're talking about the physical hammer, and I think most of the men listening probably relate to that just because of what I built over the past 6 years, that we tend to pride ourselves on being physical in nature and being capable of using our hands and wielding tools to accomplish what we want to accomplish. I'm actually really curious on that subject about the art behind you. Is that your art, or is that, like, tell me about the art behind you, because it's very, very interesting.
Well, this piece over my left shoulder is called The Crow. The crow has a lot of magical, mercurial meaning to me. And a friend of mine was kind enough, an artist friend of mine was kind enough to paint that, an artist known as Baby Girl Barrett. And the pieces of my right shoulder, the statues, they're a part of the collection by a French sculptor and artist called Marc Vinchiguera. And they were part of a collection that he did. He really focuses on men and the male form and the embodiment of the male and what that means. I think one of the pieces behind is called The Fall of Man. Another piece is Homo Crucifixes. Actually, that's a piece that's off camera. So it's really just studying the fall and rise of man through the artistic sculpting, I guess, of the bronze. And the other piece over my right is, it's actually by an artist called Mark Acitelli. And I was at his gallery. I had a couple of his pieces of art, and I was at his gallery, and I looked around and everything. Nothing inspired me on that day. And as I was walking out, I saw this piece kind of, down the side of the gallery, and I said, "What's that?" And like a lot of art, I think you look at a piece of art, and as long as you're not around the toffs and the, oh, isn't it just beautiful, the brushwork of the, the eloquence of the, which is fine. Everyone can interpret something from a piece of art. And I saw that piece, and it's called Last Man Standing Still. And I see so much in that piece about the singularity of man and being able to reside in aloneness, that knowingness of aloneness. You talked about the physical realm. I think it's important as well. We men are supposed to be stoic, and the psychological, like how strong we can be psychologically and physically. So I think it's that combination. So yeah, that kind of rounds up the artwork of what's behind me. Thank you for pointing that out.
I'm always really interested because I have a lot of artwork that surrounds me. I'm going to just turn my camera right here. So I've got a very interesting piece right here.
I think we
And
can,
I've got,
yeah.
yeah. I've got poems, and I've got pictures, and I've got this crazy picture that I found here when I moved to Maine. You're going to see my studio here. I don't know if I can turn this around. You can't really
Your
see it.
virtual tour. That's
Unfortunately,
why.
yeah, you
Oh
can't
no.
see it. Oh, maybe you can. This one right here. It says "Swing with a Girl from Farmington," which is the area I'm from. And so I'm I'm always, my kids come in and they're like, "What are they doing, Dad?" And I'm like, "They're dancing. They're dancing. Don't worry about it. They're
You want
dancing."
to, it's like art. You can interpret so many different things. The picture was far away, but I think swing, as in like take a swing, have a go. Swing as in swing dance, or swing as in get a couple of partners and have a little exchange. I mean, there's so many different. I love the poetry as well, and the philosophical as well. I mean, I love writing quotes. I wrote a philosophical quote book and a poetry book. I think I'm going to bring out a couple more of those because I enjoy that kind of writing and surrounding myself with that kind of art. I think that's important. I'm just off camera as well as a library of books. I didn't read till I was about 48. I mean, we're talking books. And there's a great corpus of literature out there, particularly, I think, there's some hidden gems and some obvious ones. And I love getting new ideas for books and exchanging ideas for books and reading. I think we learn so much from reading.
Yeah, reading, but also conversations like this. I don't know that I think you and I have some very similar perspectives about life in general. We're going to get into that, but I also think there's a lot of differences. Like I don't consider myself necessarily an artistic person. I think if I were to consider myself on this spectrum, I would say I'm more pragmatic than artistic. And so I'm always very interested in getting other ideas and other concepts and other perspectives. And then what I've found over the past 6 years is that I put myself in this box of being, oh man, I'm very pragmatic. I can swing a hammer. I can build things. And then I talk with gentlemen like yourself, and I think, okay, yeah, look, I'll be really frank with you, Greg. I used to make fun of the guys who did, you know, drama class in high school. And now that I look back on it, I'm like,
What words did you
I
call
don't
them?
know.
You may
Uh,
get in big trouble if you use them.
all right, I'm gonna get in trouble, but I'm gonna say it because this is important. I called them drama fags.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but now I look at it and think, maybe I actually would have enjoyed drama when I was in high school if I was told, you know, I could have done that instead of being on the football team and being wrestling and being in the baseball team and priding myself on being this very athletic person, which
Mm.
there's value to, of course, but
Yep.
there's value to being well-rounded.
I agree. And look, it's commendable that you can, and how refreshing we can actually talk about, what words we used to use and how we used to behave at school. And when we were younger, I had an event with a guy yesterday who'd be canceled by Google because he actually from Turkey, and he talked about how when he was younger, he was anti-Semitic, and he had those thoughts, and he wrote a short story about that. It was almost a redemptive story, and then he lost his job and got cancelled by Google just for telling his redemptive story of how he used to be. So my story is kind of interesting in that I ended up going onto the stage, but at school I was that jock. I mean, we don't use the word jock in England, but I was the captain of all the sports teams, and won the trophies, and it was all about that. The field of sports saved me. I don't say that lightly. If it weren't for the grass and the sporting arena, if you will, I don't know what would have happened to me. And my two physical education teachers, Mr. Christian and Mr. Williams, who were amazing, taught us so much, not just about the tactics and the strategy and how to play games and how to be a team player, but really, really about discipline, postponement gratification, the importance of taking care and handling your business before you get to play. Right, because we are getting to play a game, and I think there's allegories and metaphor. There's comparisons with our children, particularly we have boys, and that which we have to learn that postponement gratification to take care, handle our business, do our work, and then have a bit of playtime. Take a bit of time off, have a drink, have a cigar, whatever it may be that one does in one's recreation time. But sport was my lifesaver. I loved it, still do. I don't have the time to watch too much of it anymore, but I'm more of a player. I love playing sports.
Yeah, I am very much in alignment with you with regards to sports. I played high school basketball and football, and I wrestled and baseball, and I had coaches and mentors come into my life through the games that taught me about what it means to be a man. And I never really explored what I would say is more of the artistic side of things. So I didn't know that about you. I just assumed it was always more of that artistic side. When did that change? When did you evolve, for lack of a better term, into expressing yourself through stage and performance, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, yeah, it started at an early age. My interest was in my mother was part of an amateur dramatic group, and they started a group for kids in my hometown, my little village. So I joined that. So it was really outside of school. Not many people knew that I was doing it. There was a school drama group. It was also connected with the, I think it was a very, very religious based, like the teacher who ran it he ran the Christian education group, and that didn't really appeal to me. I didn't want to do drama and learn about religion. And our school, I think, was choices. We had to choose one or the other. And I think the choice was you either do drama or you do sport, and sport was my love. So
It's a very polarizing thing. Like, you're either a jock or you're into drama and art and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's no crossover. I will tell you, and I don't want to interject in what you're saying here, but we had one guy who, he was a football player. He was an incredible football player, a very good friend, close personal friend of mine. And he tried out for the school play and he got the part, and everybody on the team made fun of him. Everybody on the football team made fun of him. And I made fun of him too, because, that was cool. But deep down inside, I was actually pretty inspired by that he was willing to step out and put himself on stage and be uncomfortable and try new things and put himself out there. And
Interesting, the
yeah, I was pretty
unadmissible truth
inspired by
that
that.
lay dormant, and you wonder if you felt that, however many other of the team and the members of the lads on your team felt that.
Sure,
And the
sure.
tremendous amount of courage, I think, Brene Brown talks about this, vulnerability, is courage personified. And the tremendous amount of courage it probably took for him to knowing, I'm sure he knew that he was going to get a little bit of jip
No
or beef
doubt.
or a ribbing, as it's called, about doing that, and yet he still did. It reminds me of a great movie, Dead Poets Society. There's just so many wonderful lessons in that. Carpe diem, steal the day, and I think you seize the day. You hit on something here, which I think is it's about masculinity. What is, as boys, as we move through the systems, particularly our educational systems, you in the American system and me in the English educational system, what are the expectations that are put on us and placed on us by society, by our parents, our family of origin? What do we carry with us in terms of addictive behavior patterns, maybe inherited through our intergenerational DNA, which I don't think we can change. I think we can just become aware of. We can maybe influence the patterns of behavior, and how we carry those through, and how our those early years affect what we do in the rest of our lives, and how well we do it. And that self-critiquing, that message that we can say, I can do this. I can do anything. I talk to people who can't sing, and they say, when I say people, they say they can't sing, or they say they can't do something. I can't write poetry. Everyone can. Now, you may not be able to do it up to a level where, if you're comparing it to someone who's a professional, but you can do it. Anyone can do anything they put their mind to. It's just a question of to what degree, what level, what we're comparing with, and everything's relative, isn't it?
I like that word relative. We often compare ourselves to other people, and I've fallen into this trap, especially in the podcasting arena. I've been doing this for 6 years, and I thought to myself, I want to be Joe Rogan, or I want to be this guy, or I want to be that guy. And these guys, the more I get into it, the more I realize these, like Joe Rogan, for example, he spent 50 plus years in the public eye. What right do I have to think that just because I show up in the past 5 years, half decade, that I'm entitled to the same sort of results that he's been able to produce over decades and decades and decades of being in the public eye? It's very arrogant to believe that I'm entitled to something just because I want it.
Yeah, I think the entitlement part of that is an interesting word. I think we can strive for success, and we can use those, yardsticks of people who inspire us or we aspire to, and I think a certain level of confidence or self-confidence, that kind of brash internal monologue that says, yeah, I'm going to do this. I mean, I remember growing up, there was a couple of teachers that I had. I didn't really have. I had one, who I would probably say was a mentor, but a couple of teachers who, there's a Japanese word called koyashi, and koyashi is someone who inspires you through negative commentary, or and these two teachers, they just came at me and they pounded me. Now what happened was, it wasn't like perhaps in in the military, where it's like grounding discipline into you through really tough, hard love, quote unquote. It inspired me when I heard them both say, you can't do this, you're not good enough. And I just remember always saying to myself, you watch me. Yeah, you think? You bet?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't say it out loud, but it was internally. I was like, that was my internal kind of drive system that motivated, amplified me to a degree, internal self-confidence to go, oh, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And then it became not about I'm doing this to show them. It was like, I'm doing this because I'm going to prove to me that I can achieve this goal and this purpose. And I think it's really important to have those goals and those a sense of purpose and a mission. And circling back to what you said, Ryan, about the differences between the artists, perhaps. I'm an autodidact, so I'm self-taught really through experience. So I've learned my own kind of routines and schedules and habits and practices. I talk about the crafting process, which, if it's a military endeavor, then there is going to be a strategy, there is going to be a plan, and you have to train and rehearse. The same is true if you're doing a musical or a show or a play. There is a crafting process. It's probably more of an individual, or starts from an individual place, in terms of line learning and character breakdown, and how you then immerse yourself in the rehearsal experience. And then there is the performance. And one doesn't know, one can believe one's going to be successful, whatever we're using as a metric for success. But, I think that's where I go to in art, is the art in flow, really. It's practicing activating creative flow states, how to let go so the imagination can effortlessly take over. And that's a trust in self that's to the degree where everything else dissipates. You become one almost, like creator and universe. It's that omniscience or oneness of being actively in the zone, like Michael Jordan or a sports star who just in the zone, isn't thinking. It's all reactive activity and trust.
Love it. I love it. I mean, it's powerful. I think about the word that I choose to use to describe what I think you just said there is presence. You're fully present. I'm fully present in this conversation. I'm not thinking about what my kids are doing. I'm not thinking about what bills I need to pay. I'm not thinking about what exercise I did or didn't do. I'm here. I'm with you. I'm present. I'm fully available. One of the things though that I liked what you said is this. Did you say Koyashi or Kayashi? How did you pronounce that?
Yeah, I think it's Kuyashi, and it may be II.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at that. But as I was going through that, and I don't like to swear on this podcast, I really don't. I try to keep my language on the up and up. But I think there's a mentality in men that if they embraced more, they'd be more successful. And at the risk of swearing here and offending some people, the mentality is fuck off. And what I mean by that is like, you don't think I can do it? F off. Let me show you that I can do it. And I don't think generally women have that same mentality. I think they're more relational. I think they're more community based, but men are inspired by challenge. Greg, you don't think I can do that? Let me show you I can do that. And don't we even do that as friends? Like, yeah. Hey, I bet I can do 2 flips and you can only do 1. I bet I can jump 10 feet and you can only jump 8. And that F off mentality is popular culture and society would tell us that's not civil. And yet I think men thrive under that situation.
I think they thrive. I mean, that striving to be, to beat, to be competitive, to do better. And yeah, I mean, I hear it a lot, the F off or FU, which I think is really in that regard, in that context, FU, I'm going to jump higher than you. I'm going to beat you. And that physical competitive spirit that is, is there with women too, but I think it is more, I remember I read about this study that was done by Nikki Crick, who I think was a Minnesota psychology professor, and she talked about, it was actually about violence and behavior and the differences between men and women, and how men move to physical violence a lot faster. But that violence gets done faster too. So you want to go, I'll go, boof, 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 boof. And then 3 minutes later, you could be in the bar having a drink, best of friends. Whereas women move to a form of relational, behavioral intimidation or conflict, if you will, that she calls reputation savaging. So it's word of mouth, it's subtle, it's more of it's the gossip, it's the talking about the other person. And when I think about the groups at school, for me, the boys, there'd always be the flare-ups, and every day after school at the end of our street, which was a cul-de-sac, there was always a fight. It was like literally who was going to fight today. Is it Togsy against Catesy? Is it Bolger against Covesy? And there was a brick wall, and we'd always sit there. It was like the small gladiatorial arena for kids, and it was brutal sometimes. Whereas I think the groups of girls, maybe if we go by Nikki Crick's study, they were in their cliques and talking about each other which can be just as painful and harmful. And maybe that's why men, I don't know, we tend not to talk about I know this is talked about a lot these days, talk about our feelings. I think we fall victim to the canard that we have to be stoic, we have to man up, we have to be tough and tough it out. And I think there's real value to that. I do think we've lost a sense of the chivalric, the gallantry of being a gentleman, remembering the word gentle in the word man, particularly when we're with women and dealing with children and girls and mothers and grandmothers and whatnot, but that sense that we can pair that with speaking with other men in particular about what we're feeling, what we're going through, in a way that doesn't demean, shame, where men can be vulnerable, I think, together and say, God, man, I'm having a hard time today. I'm really sad that it's getting to me. I don't know what to do. And seek out a bit of mentorship. I think we've lost a lot of, I talk about the ships with my charity, Children Parents United, allyships, friendships, relationships, and mentorships. I think we need more of that mythopoetic in our society, particularly with the breakdown, as I see it, as the traditional family unit, and the encouragement of vilifying or devaluing the male in the conversation in society, particularly the last few years, toxic masculinity, all men bad, believe all of that. I think we need to have a Me Too dialogue, not just a Me Too monologue.
Good point. I want to shift gears into that in a minute, but I want to share an insight that I had last night because it's in alignment with what you're talking about here. I was training jujitsu with somebody. His name is Keegan, and he's young. He's 18 years old, about ready to go to college and play lacrosse down in Massachusetts. And, so we were training, and he's younger than me, and he's actually, frankly, less experienced than me in the world of jiu-jitsu. And last night he got the better of me. And at first I was like, damn, I shouldn't have let him get the better of me. And I still believe that. But also I was proud of him too, now so we were training and he got the better of me and I had to tap because he submitted me. And, there's just something about it where I just think more highly of him because he did that. We did it in a controlled environment. We had rules, some spoken, some unspoken rules about how we train together. And I just think more highly of him because he got the better of me. And not only do I think more highly of him, I also think more highly of myself because I was willing to put myself in the arena. But then I realized, okay, well, he got me. So what do I need to do to learn, to get better, to improve? And I think, again, generally speaking, women don't operate like this, but men do. And yet we don't create these environments. You use the word vulnerability. I've always been very hesitant to use that word because I think what popular culture interprets that as is just, exposing all your weaknesses for the sake of exposing your weaknesses. I don't think that's the case. Same thing with safe spaces. No, what we want to do is we want to create environments where we can be real and truthful and work hard and push and challenge each other. But that's not what popular culture says. And I think it's a real detriment to society.
Yeah, vulnerability is not, and safe spaces isn't a space to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is terrifying. It's particularly for men. It's terrifying. And to your point about, your the jiu-jitsu, I think, you thought more highly of him because he thought more highly of himself because he'd beaten his mentor in that moment, which he knew that you appreciated. He knew it was real as well. You didn't just give him the victory.
No, I never would.
It was authentic. So with that shared communal appreciation that lifted his spirits, and he now believes that he can beat you the next time. Now, the next time, it's probably likely on percentages, he's not going to take you down. He's going to be the one that submits. But that lingering memory that he can do it because he's done it, he's experienced it, is really vital and really important. And I think that there's a lot of merit to that, and we're losing a lot of the meritocracy, particularly right now in our society, in general, with helicopter parenting, with academia going all about, I just saw a report the other day about English grades, in higher education, and how everyone's getting A's. Like literally everyone is getting A's. So They're now looking at the tests finally, because after years they've made them so easy that everyone's getting A's, to make them harder and to reset them. I say, well, why did you reset them in the first place? We have to have an earned system of merit. You don't get the stripes on your chest or on your badge or on your shoulder. They're earned. They're not given. And then you have a real sense of appreciation and accomplishment, I think. And accomplishing something is, particularly in that world of jiu-jitsu, which is, it reminds me of that transmogrification that Jordan Hall talks about, that kind of, you actually become one with the other in terms of flow. So you're not fighting an opponent. You're having to work with the energy and the space of their moves, activity, reactivity. It's almost like a dance and a lot of choreography. I would imagine he says, not knowing anything about jiu-jitsu.
I'm not familiar. Did you say Jordan Hall?
Yeah, he talks about antifragility and transmogrification. So if you consider robustness, so that's the ability to resist a force while being what and where and how one is. So if I'm standing in front of you and you shove me really hard, I'm robust, so I remain unmoved. I mean, I may just falter a bit. So that's energy versus energy. And then resilience, if you consider resilience, the ability to respond to some force, your force, if you shove me out, to what and how and where before the force was applied. So if you're standing in front of me and you shove me, if I'm resilient, I can return, and I buckle a bit, I can return to the original position and disposition, right? Energy versus energy, because energy is, that emotional energy, if you will. So I'm back to my original disposition. Now, consider anti-fragility. This time, when you shove me, I invent Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu. That's transmogrification, is what I'm getting at. That's what
it's interesting. I mean, I think about it even when I go to class on just this micro scale of like, I'm not going to allow another man to exert his will upon me. And sometimes that means I need to resist. Sometimes that means I need to flow or, transfer the energy. But one of the things that you said is you talked about this concept of competition. And I've thought a lot about this lately. If you look at a football game, for example, or soccer or baseball, or pick your sport, we tend to think of it in terms of competition. I'm competing against you, but really, if you scale back, it's not really competition. It's more cooperation, right? Because Greg, if you and I are going to compete against each other in whatever arena, well, we believe so much in the concept of cooperation that we'll actually bring a third party in and ensure that we abide by the rules. Right. So it's not just,
you mean like a referee
or an umpire or whatever. Right. So we believe so much in cooperation and adherence to the rules that we agree upon that we're going to bring a third party in and we're going to allow him to administer and make sure that we're following the rules. Like I've agreed to that. You've agreed to that. And so it's not so much competition as much as it is cooperation. We're going to work together to improve ourselves. And today, you might get the better of me. Tomorrow, I might get the better of you, but it's within a certain confine. It's within certain constraints that we've mutually agreed upon so that we can improve ourselves, not just compete against each other and prove who's the best, but how can I get better because Greg bested me or I bested you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that makes me think of, that cooperation or the rule setting, the standards and practices before you enter the pitch. That reminds me again, the parallel with the crafting process, the strategy, the planning. Well, it has to be done in an orderly fashion. There has to be maintenance of the rules. If they're evolving, if they're found to not work, or if it's a particular game in sport, like you mentioned, soccer, the rules of offside are always evolving and always being questioned. But once you're on the pitch, once you're on the field of play, there is an inherent understanding, I guess is where you're getting to, of cooperation, in that we trust that each of us are going to abide by the rules, and people will push the rules, they will break the rules. If it's a boxing match, someone might bite an ear, someone might break someone's leg in a tackle, but there has to be that cooperation. And I think about the pickup games that I played of soccer, and when we don't have a referee, we have to abide by a kind of a cooperation in flux, if you will, because there isn't a linesman or a referee's assistant or a referee to provide us with a whistle or to let us know that the rules have been transgressed.
But don't we even check ourselves in that situation? Let's just take a pickup game of basketball or soccer or whatever it is. Like even just, a no holds barred pickup game, like street rules, there's still a line.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's oftentimes it's unspoken, but there's still a line. And if somebody crosses it, everybody else says, bro, like you crossed the line, like that's too much. And so we all hold each other accountable and hold each other in check, even if there's not some third party referee.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is personalities and character. Who does the checking in the game? Is it the best player? Is it the most vocal? Is it the most liked person? The most generally, the guy who gets along with everyone? And what if there's someone who just does not agree? The individual playing is like, no, no, and is combative. Like that can take the game to a whole new level. But yeah, there is something to the cooperation of competition and the strategy and the tactics and the rules and the playbook. And if you abide by the rules, it reminds me of Augustine of Hipponensis, who's an old philosopher, and he talked about war theory. Just war theory is what it was called. And there was two concepts to it. It was the right to go to war and the right conduct in war, like moral responsibility. And I think that's what we're referring to when we talk about behavior on the field of play, particularly if there isn't a referee or an umpire and we're trusting ourselves in a pickup game, if you will. There has to be the right conduct, and that's a shared responsibility, I think.
So to go back to who gets to determine the rules or who gets to enforce the rules, you said, is it the most likable person, the most popular person, et cetera, et cetera? I think it's the most influential person.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It might be the most assertive person.
And that is an element of influence, right? Somebody who's assertive, for example, might be more influential. Somebody who's likable might be more influential. Somebody who's stronger physically might be more influential. But I think if we were to scale back and say, what is it really that men are looking to, and who gets to enforce the rules, that's the most influential individual. And there's a lot of factors that go into that level of influence.
Yeah, I think as well of, is it the most quiet and silent person who's pragmatic and is more of a diplomat, a peacekeeper, because different situations call for different character traits, right?
Sure.
And certain people are going to have that more. I mean, the team analogy, with the, I automatically go to soccer and I think of the guy who dribbles the ball. Well, that takes a tremendous amount of skill of the ball being. Then there's the big, tall center forward who can head the ball, who can shoot from 40 yards and score. There's the free kick playmaker. There's so many different aspects that go up to making the team. But yeah, it's a really interesting point you made about the different character traits that will bring people together and at least find a commonality so that the game can keep going and progressing and moving forward in a positive way, because sports is extremely enjoyable, very positive, sometimes challenging, sometimes extremely disappointing if we lose or our team loses. But wow, we feel the disappointment because there is such reward at winning the trophy and winning the game. It's the the yin and yang, the push and pull. We need that other to appreciate self.
Look, I will say as a genuine American that I don't know that I relate to your soccer analogies as well as maybe I could, or football analogies as you would call them. But I think we're in agreement with that for sure.
Well, as an ingenuine American, we can talk American football and basketball to a lesser degree, or hockey, or I mean, look, American sports. When I first started watching American football years ago, and the first thing I noticed was, wow, there's 3 teams playing on one team. And then there's all these specialists, and they all have like a long snapper. I'm like, is there a short snapper? I'm like, wow, there's so many different things. Special teams. I'm like, special. What makes them special? A special team within the team, and then you can be on one particular team and play on another team. So you're versatile. You can be a triple threat, if you will. So yeah, American sports is fascinating. I love American sports. I'll talk sports for hours.
And vice versa, man. Vice versa. If we just let go of our ego and pride just a little bit, not too much, maintain some of that, but just a little bit, then we might be able to learn from some different cultures that are available to us.
Yeah, and yeah, and similar situation. You just took me back to when I was 11 years old playing on my soccer team or football team, and we were the best team in the league, and we got to the cup final, which everyone plays in the knockout stage, and then you get to the final. And we were playing a team we'd beaten in the regular season, as you would call it in America, I think 11-0, and we became complacent and arrogant. I was like, I'd already picked up the trophy in my mind, and we lost. 1-0. We lost the league final, and that stayed with me for the rest of my life. That was that team was called Southport Amateurs, ironically, and that experience stayed with me. And then a friend of mine, who played professional tennis, his first Wimbledon tournament, he was playing a legendary player called Ivan Lendl in, I think it was the quarterfinals, and he had 3 match points, and he lost all 3 match points. And I remember asking, after he did the press conference, I said, "What happened? 3 match points." He said, "In my mind, I'd already won. As I was waiting to receive the ball, I was thinking about what I'd say at the press conference. I was thinking about who I might play in the next round in the semi-finals, and I got ahead of myself." So I think that's a reminder as well to not get ahead of yourself, keep a little bit of humility, get beaten once in a while, even though you don't plan on it, by your 18-year-old that you're mentoring in jiu-jitsu, and tap yourself out. Oh, hang on a second, let's have a word here. Look in the mirror. I'm not as great as I thought I was. I'm still great, but I can still be greater. But I'm not as great as I was yesterday, and I'm not getting any younger.
Well, there's a weird thing in society today that says that you ought to feel good about your performance regardless of how you performed, right? Like, oh, you should just, in the body positive movement, you should just be happy. You should embrace who you are. And it's like, I hear that. And I think be happy with who you are doesn't mean be satisfied with less than you're capable of. And I think that's how a lot of people in modern society have interpreted it. I'm not as good as I could be. Mm-hmm. I could do these things and I could be this, but I'm not going to do those things. So why don't I just embrace and be satisfied with where I currently am?
Yeah, I think, look, maybe we replace happy with fulfilled.
I like that word. That is actually, I'm glad you said that. That is my word of, I don't like happy because I don't want to be happy. I want to be fulfilled. Happiness is the absence of conflict and strife and challenge. Fulfillment is the ability to deal with it effectively.
Exactly. And I think it takes a little psychological or philosophical work in terms of stoicism to work through those moments. So if someone says, "Oh, just be happy with the weight that you are," well, you can't tell someone or instruct someone to be happy. Happiness is fleeting. And what does one know anyway? I mean, not getting too philosophical, but wisdom is knowing I am nothing. Love is knowing I am everything. And in between the two, my life moves, and it moves on a scale of which sometimes I can influence and other times I just have to surrender to and let go. And that sense of fulfillment, how do I feel fulfilled? Can I find meaning? I define meaning as everything happens for a reason. We make up afterwards. And it's the we make up afterwards part that's important. Purpose. I think there's a crisis of meaning right now, particularly with younger generations, particularly younger generations of boys, because of the messaging that's being put out there, because of our educational system that doesn't have boy-centric books. Boys need their imaginations to be sparked. That's reduced recess time. Boys need to be able to go out and play. I mean, good grief! I think back to my school days. If I wasn't able to go out and play, I'd have been in a terrible state. We're supposed to sit there. We have kinetic, frenetic energy of boys. It's just bubbling over. So sit still. It's like telling someone to calm down. That's the last thing we should tell someone who's feeling anxious or upset. And this notion that everyone gets a trophy, everyone's a winner. I'm reminded of when I first coached my eldest boy, was 5 at the time, AOSO soccer, and Romeo Beckham, David Beckham's son, was on the team as well. And at the time, David was the captain of England, and Romeo went down in a tackle. And they're 5 years old, and it was very bizarre coaching soccer or footy in America, I have to tell you, because there's a lot of, random, pointless yelling things from the sidelines from parents. Go, yes, go. And the speech
that was me, by the way. If you heard, it was me yelling from the sidelines. I guarantee it was me. Anyways, proceed.
Well, I get it. I get the enthusiasm. But when I spoke to my parents, the parents of the kids that I was coaching at the start of the season, every season was, look, your kids are just going to hear mindless screaming. So, just simmer it down. Maybe if there's a goal or something to cheer or applaud, that it'd be great to hear that rush of excitement or vocal excitement then. And, it's okay to clap at the other team or another player on the other team or anyone does a great move or scores a great goal. But just one droning, monotonous, it's kind of pointless. But where it was, I forget that. Oh yes, to Romeo Beckham. So he goes down, and most of the parents were like, "Oh gosh, there was that usual." And I think mums have that more than dads as well. It's the nurturing of the mother and the matriarch compared to the risk reward of the patriarch. If I'm allowed to even use the word patriarch these days.
You're allowed here.
And I looked at David, who's his dad, and David just turned to me and went, "He's all right. He'll run it off." I was like, "All right." And the game continued, and sure enough, Romeo was on the floor. It was his knee, kind of struggled, and then he got up, looked to the sidelines. Dad gave him a nod, like, "You're all right, son," kind of look, and on with the game he went. And that's the school of hard knocks. And we don't seem to be nurturing that these days, particularly in schools and our educational system. And I worry about our younger generations of boys because of that. That's not to say that I want everyone to experience what I had at school, which was I got attacked 3 times on my first day of high school. One was a sucker punch from behind as well. So it was a real kind of baptism of fire as survival in a very physical way. But in a way that kind of taught me I had to learn quick the school of hard knocks. And when you get out there in the big bad world, it's not all safe spaces and feeling realms and, everyone wins a trophy. You got to earn it. And there'll be disappointments and suffering and hard knocks, many of them. And how you respond to that, I think, is vital.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you bring this up because there's this fascinating dichotomy between the masculine and the feminine, right? So when my child, for example, and I've got 4 kids, will fall off their bike. I've got my 5-year-old who is the last to learn how to ride a bike, and he crashes. My wife will run to him and pick him up and quite literally kiss his knee and make sure he's okay. And I will not do that. In fact, I'm repulsed by that. And I will say, "Get your ass up. You're okay." Both of us, by the way, here's the interesting thing. Both of us are exhibiting love.
Oh yeah.
Like there's love in both responses. I say, "Get back up, get on, wipe off the pebbles and the dirt in your knee and get back on." And my wife says, "Let me kiss your boo-boo." Both are love. This is why it's so important that we have the feminine and the masculine working together to help raise our children the way they need to be raised.
I completely agree. I mean, if you look at all the data and all the statistics and all the evidence out there, children who are raised with biological mother and biological father have a better chance in nearly every metric in life. And, when you, the difference, I think, when you talk about the differences between mothering and fathering, okay, so fatherhood, I think, is vital for boys in many regards, not least of which what I mentioned earlier, postponement gratification. So that boys can become self-competent at being able to discern between the tasks they need to complete, whether it be homework or whatever else, or chores, before doing the things they want to do. And if you think of that as an internal risk-reward value system, if you will, that you're instilling in your children or your child or your boy or whatever, as they're growing, that's kind of like the rite of passage, if you will, of some of that internal financial belief system or principles. And I think when fathers are engaged with their sons, there is that is the major difference for me, is that mom will nurture in terms of bringing in close to breast and tending to, "Are you okay?" and tend to the wound and make sure that tears are dried. And whereas dad, and I think this is necessary, will kind of be that the nature of the patriarch and the father is to push more of that risk reward, like, yeah, get up in the trees, let's climb the branch, do it together. And if you fall, you might break an arm, you might break a leg, but it'll mend. We have to have that risk reward. And I think that I've seen waning in recent years. And when boundaries are important too. I mean, when girls and boys, we all need, talked about vulnerability earlier on. It's no good just spilling all of your vulnerable self out. You have to have boundaries and know the difference between privacy and secrets, and emotional boundaries, intellectual boundaries, physical boundaries, all of the different forms of boundaries. And why do boys need to learn boundaries? Well, because they experience that they can't manipulate a better deal with dad. I think they kids love to play mom and dad off against each other. And mom, because of the nurturing aspect, and I'm speaking generally here, may give in, whereas dad, it's harder. Dad's, I think, coming together with mom to instill some form of discipline and parental influence in a very masculine way. And I do think that boys who are raised either predominantly by dads or at least equally with moms become more purpose-driven, more goal-oriented. They're able to discern the needs from their wants and are less likely to have challenges on focus, because purpose and goals and missions need focus and refocusing. And yeah, roughhousing as well. I mean, I think about roughhousing and that physical nature. I think that's a vital experience for boys to learn about healthy boundaries. So it engenders that sense of empathy of self and other. For if you're roughhousing as a little boy with another lad and you go too far, you overstep the boundary, do you experience the tears or the upset or the anger or the retribution from the other boy? And I think children, particularly boys who learn more of that at a young age, or at least go through that with dads present, much more likely as they get older to have friends and less likely to become depressed and withdrawn. And that requires competitiveness. It requires the assertiveness. It requires physical aggression. It requires, because it's fun, and that's dad-style parenting, I think, and guiding boys through that disciplined experience, I think, is a necessary component in balancing the psyche of the young male, instills a sense of agency and sovereignty, and helps create that value system that's healthy and more balanced, well balanced with the nurturing aspects that I think we men have to have too, that maybe perhaps come more from mothers and the matriarch, and that more assertive, I'm a leader, I'm going to take risks, and be successful, quote unquote, that comes from the patriarch.
I'm really glad that you're talking about this concept of balance here, because I think that there is this interesting phenomenon, and I've experienced over the past 6 years because of the work I do. And I have a lot of women who listen to this podcast who will message me and say, well, women can be strong too.
And they can.
And they can.
And they are.
And exactly. And what I share and what you share and what we talk about as men and fathers and males who want to lift up our future generations isn't at odds with what femininity is. It isn't at odds with, like, this is not a competition. I think women, my wife is one of the strongest women I know. Mm-hmm. That said, she doesn't raise our kids the way that I raise my kids. And it's important that our children have strength from both the feminine and masculine. And they're not going to get a whole lot of empathy and kindness and compassion necessarily from me relative to what they're going to get from their mother. But neither one of them means that one of us is less strong and more weak. It just means that we're coming at it from a different angle. And I'm really discouraged about general society in that women have generally been conditioned to believe through this feminist movement over the past 40 years that you need to behave like men in order to be equal. No, you don't at all. You need to be women. You need to be strong and assertive and nurturing and supportive and motherly and ladylike. And there's a level of strength that comes with that too. You don't need to be a man to be strong. I don't know. I feel
I,
like
I
I'm
agree
rambling a
with
little
you.
here. You
No, no,
understand what
no.
I'm
I,
saying,
I,
right?
I absolutely agree with you. I think the conversation about feminism, and I've mentioned this before, feminism, we don't talk about the balance of masculism a lot. You know, and when we do, when men do, we may be charged, like you've experienced, with well, women can be too. Well, like, okay, no one's saying that right now. We're
Right.
actually
Of
we're
course.
talking about men. Okay, as women will talk about women, and women will talk about being women with other women. So we can have those singular conversations with you know with men and women, and we can come together in a co-ed conversation, just like sports. That's not a problem. And talking about these issues, it doesn't need to be done in a silo, and it doesn't need to be done without nuance, right? So feminism. You know, you talked about feminism in the last 40 years. I believe it's important to talk about, you know, the different forms or schools of feminism. So there's equality feminism or factual feminism, or what Helen Pluckrose likes to call empowerment feminism. And that is noble. I agree with that. That's a really strong brand or form or ideology of feminism that I get behind, I stand behind, I'm championing women in all its different forms. It's the other side, the other break-off branch of third and fourth wave feminism, where it
It's the
evolved.
extreme side of things.
That's right, the postmodern progressive extreme feminism that wants to diminish the father and the male, that wants to say that everything is extreme, believe all women, not listen to women, that says, you know, that doesn't believe in the value of the father, that doesn't believe that women should stay home, have agency if they want to, and be a homemaker or a housewife, as it used to be called in England, and doesn't believe it's an individual choice for a woman because we've fought so hard over the years to get the vote and get this and get that. Well, that's great, but ultimately it's an individual choice, just like it is for individual men and individual women. And you know, that's the partnership and the union of a marriage or a partnership in making those determinations, decisions together, and finding out a plan, a strategy that works for you and actually illuminates and really challenges and inspires and brings out the best of both, because that's really what we want, isn't it? We don't want to be discouraging, man. What a discouraging message. I mean, you know, women can be that too. Okay, yeah, okay, they can. But for
They
right now,
can, but should
we're having
they?
a conversation. Should they? Well, you know, maybe that's a conversation for, you know, I'm not a woman, so I can comment on what I think about individual women. But I'm a man, you know, and I have two boys, two sons. So that's you know, really my experience and what I can really genuinely speak to, and I can explore and try and get some data and some research, you know, like particularly with, you know, when we hear all this messaging of you know, toxic masculinity and smash the patriarchy and et cetera, et cetera. And all this signaling to boys, and we're doing away with the meritocracy, and it's about equity of outcomes rather than equity or equality of opportunity. And I think masculinity, to a degree, is and has been targeted recently, and fatherhood, I think, lies in the bullseye. I think, you know, as a society, we've rightly opened up the institution of family and what that means to be more inclusive. You know, but I think the traditional role of a family patriarch has been severely denigrated. You know, for 30 years, the virtuous and binding thread that fathers have served as in a healthy Western society has increasingly been pulled out of the modern tapestry, thanks to this consistent drumbeat of these third and fourth wave quote unquote modern feminists, pop culture stereotypes, and probably the biggest culprit is our family law system. So yeah, having a nuanced conversation that talks about the differences between feminism and masculism, and then if we're focusing on feminism, the different kinds of feminism, historically how it evolved, what an individual thinks about that. It's so much these days I hear, you know, quite frankly, sexist language on one side. Oh, he's mansplaining. Well, okay. All right. So that's a man who's explaining something in a male way that's very stereotypical, very general, and also quite negative. You know, should we have womansplaining? You know, we have toxic masculinity. Should we have toxic? I mean, equality should mean we talk about both, but I don't think, demonizing men is not the solution. That's the problem.
Uh, period. Like what more can I say to that? I think you're completely right. If we were to think about our conversation that we had earlier with sports, let's take American football for example. A football player might think as a tight end that, well, like I can block, I can snap a football. Yeah, sure. Nobody's saying you can't. We're just we're just questioning whether or not you should, whether or not maybe your attributes and your skill set and your qualities might be better served as a tight end or a wide receiver or a running back or a linebacker or a cornerback. It's not about whether or not you can, it's about whether or not your attributes, and some of those are inherent and some of those are developed, but whether or not your attributes could be used in better situations. And so I look at my wife and I think my wife is lovely. She's beautiful. And that's not just her physical presence, it's her emotional and spiritual presence. She's beautiful. And so should she be the one to tell my son, hey, suck it up, be a man? No, she could say that, but she shouldn't be the one who says that. I should be the one who says that. And there's some situations like we hear these things about traditional gender roles of like, well, traditional, they're outdated. Well, no, they're actually not outdated. They're biological constructs, and they're supported societally because they work. And only until the relative ease of modernity have we even been able to have the luxury of calling into question what quote unquote traditional gender roles are. It's a nice luxury, but it's going to create its own set of problems.
Well, I think that's what we're seeing. It's not that it's outdated. These traditional roles aren't outdated. They evolve. It's like science. It's emergent truths that evolve over time. When we test, push back, we have dialectic, we have a thesis, an antithesis, and then we get to the synthesis. But we don't stop at the synthesis of where we arrive at with the emergent truth. We keep asking, we keep questioning and questing for better questions. I mean, that's really where it's at for me, I think, is asking the meaningful questions of the answers that we receive. And how we can be fulfilled, how we can be more, and that I think is the fulfillment of wisdom, right? So it's a bit of an abstract term, but the concept of wisdom, isn't that mysterious. Being wise, attempting to live and die well, is as good as is leading. I guess when I say leading, I don't mean you're leading other people, but you're leading as good a life as possible within the troubled conditions of existence. And they are troubled. And the goal of wisdom, I think, is fulfillment and how we can get there. And it's not that your wife shouldn't be saying this or you shouldn't be saying this. You typically find that naturally she's not going to, and you are. That's just the differences. There are innate, inherent differences biologically. And it's become a little confused and confusing as we've and in a lot of respects, rightfully and positively evolved the gender roles. But I think we have to keep having that conversation and participation within that doesn't say all X is bad and all Y is bad, and agree to be disagreeable at times, and really look at what the data is telling us, what the research is telling us, what our personal experiences inform us of. And, talking about boys in school and college, I mean, you just have to look at the data. 60% of college undergraduate degrees are earned by women. Brilliant. We can champion the women who, great.
Of course.
But then we can still go, okay, so boys are lagging behind in education. 37% more women go to graduate school. 52% of doctorates are earned by women. And on top of those numbers like that, boys are hearing these messages that they're toxic day in, day out. And we really have to, if women and mothers can champion girls and daughters, then we can champion boys, fathers, mentors, right? I mean, that's okay to have that conversation. In fact, it's not okay, it's necessary.
It's necessary.
It's really necessary.
You use the word confusing. It's confusing, but I don't know if it is. I really don't think it is. I
Well,
don't I don't think it's confusing for a man who's listening to this podcast, or even a man who doesn't listen to this podcast, to know inherently what and instinctively what he should be doing. I don't think it's inherently confusing for a woman who wants to be a great mother, who wants to be a great woman, who wants to be strong, who wants to raise her kids in righteousness. I don't think it's that confusing. And yet we're bombarded with these messages from social media and from pop culture who say, you're not good enough, you're not doing it right, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you're not as good as a woman, you're not as good as a man. We have to reject these ideas because that's what confuses and conflates the situation.
yeah, I think we have to amplify the voices of the quote unquote good men, the good fathers, the strong mentors, the leaders, the quiet ones, the local heroes, all of the builders, the laborers, all of that. But we also as well have to empower and champion the voices of those noble equality feminists, factual feminists, empowerment feminists who want the best for women, but not at the expense of men
I like it.
or boys, right? So really championing those sets of people and calling out sometimes, I was reticent to do this for quite a while. I kept hearing toxic masculinity. Well, the answer isn't to just fight fire with fire and talk, well, why aren't we talking about toxic femininity and calling people? So once in a while, we do need to push back. We do need to push back on this narrative and the misinterpretation of individual stories, whether it be in mainstream media or, as I call it, anti-social media, and stand up, speak out, particularly in this cancel culture that has this public opinion of guilty till proven more guilty, and say no. And speak up for people, strangers and people in academia and sports people in many different walks of life, because eventually it's coming for you. Identity politics eventually devours itself, but it's going to, and has been, grabbing a lot of people on the way, and having a little bit of, moral fiber, I think, to challenge the moral hypocrisy of our times. There's so much moral hypocrisy out there. And who's leading the conversation? Why are we talking about this again, day after day after day? Why are you forcing me to see things through a lens, your prism, which is negative kaleidoscope, if you will, of darkness and the worst in humanity, and people saying what they hate and what they stand against, and rather than what do you love? What do you stand for? And at times I will call out, particularly people who make false allegations. I think victimhood has become the new social currency. The economy is booming. And I think we need to get back to a little bit more of self-reliance and personal responsibility. And the more we can take on, the more we can lean into that portal of responsibility, better. And I think it's an early age learned experience. Particularly again with boys and men who we need the assertiveness and that aggressiveness and that physicality, fighting wars, going into burning buildings. I don't care who it is in terms of quote unquote equality. If I'm lying in a burning building, I just want the strongest, most courageous person to come and get me. And my God, don't we all, when it comes to it? Nice to see.
Of course.
Right.
I watched this video the other day, and it was, a little meme or whatever video. And some female trainer had her, she was an alligator trainer, the way I understood it. And she got her arm bitten by an alligator, and was doing that alligator death roll or whatever. I can't imagine what was going through her mind is like, oh, no. I don't want to be rescued by a man.
Right. Well,
I just want to be rescued. I don't care who it is.
Not quite as dangerous or rescuing, but I've got on a plane a couple of times, and I'm always wanting to be looking at this, as someone who's not as physically strong to get those bags in the overhead compartments can be pretty heavy, and so I'm always on the lookout to offer and help out, and I think that's being a gentleman. But this first time it happened, I was like, can I help you with that? Excuse me, do you need a hand with that? I don't need help from a man. Like, well, hang on. Are there any? I want to call out to the, get on the intercom. If there are any ladies, 175 pounds, who regularly work out and in good physical condition, please come to the front and help with this. Because so that's what has come down to sex. I'm probably a misogynist for
Right.
offering to help.
You are. I can't believe you. I can't believe it's the
Oh,
same thing with a door. It's like I don't open a door because I think a woman is incapable. I just
right.
open a door because I think it's a by the way, I also open doors for men. Like
Yeah.
I don't
Right. Right.
exclusively open the
Right.
door for women. Like
Right, standing at the dinner
it's
table. When I'm at, I'm at the dinner table. I stand when a woman stands or comes back to sit, and that's learned behavior. I didn't learn all that growing up. That's something that I chose to reinstill or instill in myself, and I've been laughed at. I mean, I stood at the table, and I've had a guy. There's been a lot of couples, and a guy. What are you doing? I'm just standing as a mark of respect for the lady.
just
Oh, really?
respect.
Making us all look bad? I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
not. No, there's no judgment on you whatsoever. This is just a personal choice,
Right.
and there really wasn't. It's not.
Of course.
I'm not going to apologize for your uncomfortability as you tried to slay me with a whip-covered put down in front of everyone at the table. I'm just going to stay my course, do what I do, walking on the on the traffic side of the street with a lady on the inside. I mean, these are things to me that are like obvious, but they're not. They weren't obvious to me growing up because I didn't know about them.
Yeah, well, and also they shouldn't be. I was walking with my daughter and we were in the parking lot of Walmart and my daughter's she's going to be 8 years old. And I said, "Hey, on just come over here on this other side." And she says, "That's right, Dad, because a man always walks on the outside."
Mm,
And she wouldn't inherently know that. How would she know that?
right,
Other than what I taught her, right? And she
right.
doesn't think that she's incapable of it. She doesn't think I think less of her. She just thinks, oh, here's a man who happens to be my father, who respects me,
Right.
who honors me, who cares about me. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
Nothing else other than that.
And if she grows up and she's with a man who doesn't walk on the outside, if you will, she she might question it. She might ask him, and that's okay too. But that rather than the strident nature of growing into a kind of the fourth wave feminist who's like, I don't want to even be walking with a man, and if I am walking a man, I don't need you to walk on the outside. And then it's raining and there's a splash and a puddle and she gets soaking wet. Well, I'd rather be soaking wet than the man. I'm like, well, just stop with the nonsense. Just if you don't,
Relax.
yeah, chill, take it easy. You
Right.
don't have to be on a social justice campaign for equality every single day. And if you are, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and see, some of the hypocrisy that, the equality movement, quote unquote, comes out with, because it's laughable sometimes.
Greg, I have so many questions. And I've only done this once or twice, but I just think we need to have a part two because you got a book over your right shoulder called The Respondent. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about family court and family law. Um, we need
Let's
to
do
talk
it. We'll
about
do a
all
part
this.
two. Yeah.
And so we need to do a part two. We're going to release this. We're going to get to this out to the guys. They're going to love what we're talking about. And we just need to do a part two if you're open for that.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I thought we'd get to it quicker than we did, but like we've been talking about so much good stuff here. I'm like, well, I'm not going to detract from what we're talking about to get to that. Like, this is good stuff too. So we definitely need to do a part two.
I'd be happy to. It's actually really enjoyable because it's not, like you mentioned early on, being in the present, being in the now moment, not worrying about the time. That's when time flies. And I know what it's like
Yeah,
when you're hosting a podcast. You look at the clock and you go, hang on a second, we've gone longer than
yeah,
perfectly fine. No, I've
yeah.
really enjoyed our conversation. I'd be happy to come back for a part two and talk about the respondent in my book and anything else you'd like to talk about.
Do you want to share with us really quickly just how to connect with you so the guys can get primed for the conversation I think we'll have in the next 2 to 3 weeks, part two to this discussion here?
Yeah, sure. My the realgregellis.com is kind of the hub and home for information about me, but my main focus right now is the respondent.com. That will have information about my book, The Respondent, Exposing the Cartel of Family Law, introduction by Johnny Depp, forward by Alec Baldwin. And we can talk more about that. And it's got information about my nonprofit, the charitable extension of The Respondent, CPU, which stands for Children and Parents United. And that's really the usual social media channels, Twitter and Facebook and blah, blah, blah. Get your dopamine hits, but don't do it too long. Make sure you put the phone down.
Thank you.
tend to that device dependency. But yeah, the respondent.com, realgregellis.com, they're the two websites I would suggest. And then everything kind of flows out from there.
Excellent. We're going to sync it all up for the guys. And of course, you and I are going to stay in touch. So, guys, if you're listening to this right now and you want more of the conversation we're having, know that part 2 is going to be coming out in a week or 2 or 3 weeks. And I've got a list of questions. I never make questions ahead of time, but based on our conversation, you may have noticed me putting my head down. I'm not checking my phone. I'm writing notes. So I've got a bunch of other questions that I need to ask you, and I'm looking forward to part 2. Greg, thanks for joining us today, man. I really appreciate your insight.
Very great to be on. And I'll end with one question for you that might tee up something in the book or some of what I talk about in the book. Which country do you think is the world leader in children growing up in single parent households?
Single parent households. I mean, I would say the US. I would say our country.
Correct. And the next question will be why, but we can talk about that the next time that we get together.
I like that. Man, you're teeing up a little teaser there. It's like you've been in Hollywood. You know how to put those teasers out there or what? I don't know.
It's important because, every day in our family law system and divorce courts, 4,000 children lose a parent. That's every single day. 4,000 children lose a parent. And I've explored some of the reasons why, and we can talk about it. It's not necessarily all just about that, because my harrowing dystopian story is part of the respondent, and many other men and many other fathers have been through, tens of thousands have been through similar, and families and children, and so I'm trying to be of service. I'm trying to put something good back into the world, and we'll do a part 2. I'm rambling.
Yeah, I feel like, this is a great discussion, so don't take this the wrong way, but I feel like I may have failed the guys because, quite honestly, we've never had a discussion about family courts and family law. And I know that there are thousands, literally, you're talking about 4,000 children a day. There are thousands of men who are losing their sons and daughters.
That's right. There is,
and this isn't a conversation we've had. We need to have this so it's imperative that we do the follow-up conversation today.
I think so too. There are so many harrowing stuff. I get emails now after the book came out. I get so many emails a day with people sharing their stories. Harrowing stories, people who've been serving in the military who come back, men who come back, and we will talk about the details of stories like this, but they are suddenly homeless and unable to see their families. And
I have personal examples of that.
Right. And there are reasons for this. And I think it's the conversation that we haven't been having. I think many people and organizations and movements have been talking about this, as I've found out recently after my book came out, for decades. That there hasn't been the multimedia conversation and voices amplified to actually discuss why it's happening, who's incentivized. The family law cartel that I talk about in the book is a $60 billion a year industry. And there is legalized child trafficking going on, kidnapping of children. It's harrowing when you get into it, but I do think it's a national health emergency, maybe even a mental health or physical health emergency that nobody seems to be talking about and caring about, unless you find yourself in the system. So what I'm trying to do is get this conversation going, and really talk about these, because I think it affects all of us if we actually stop for a moment. We all know someone who's had a relationship breakdown, or divorced parents, or we're divorced, or we know someone who's divorced, or been through the divorce trap and the zero-sum game of divorce court. And it's all really, when I looked, one of the reasons I wrote the book, and I'm going to stop in a moment because I know there's part 2 coming up, was I needed to. I didn't want to. I needed to. There weren't any books to help me as a man and a father get through when my personal crisis suddenly hit in a moment. Literally in a moment, I went from a beautiful life, kids in a private school, country club, like the life I had earned, the privileged life that I'd earned, to within 8 hours, I was homeless, almost destitute, and being used as a human toilet while I was incarcerated. So we can talk about that the next time.
We're going to hit on all of it. It's so, so important. And I know the guys are going to resonate. Greg, I appreciate you. I appreciate your work. This is going to sound stupid, but take it for what it's worth. My kids and I are going to watch Pirates tonight. and I'm going to say, I got to talk with Greg today. And they're going to be so excited about it. So
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do on this show and everything that you've been doing. I appreciate your wife, because without her, you'd have a harder time being here and probably wouldn't enjoy it as much. I just had to say that. And yeah, thank you. And in terms of pirates, you know, you've got to be the best podcaster I've ever seen. How's that for you? A line from the Pirates.
I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna save that and show that to my to my kids.
Ryan's got to be the best podcaster I've ever seen.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. All right, brother. I appreciate you.
You too.
You and I are going to stay in touch. We're going to do this follow up in a week or two, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ryan. Be well.